All right, everybody. It is time to talk a little bit more about if statements. So we covered kind of the very basic of how they work. Let's go ahead and save this. If statements, let's say. All right. So your basic if has a couple of things that you have to deal with. An if is basically just a simple question, and if this is true, you do this. If it is not, well, you can tell it to do other things too. I think last time we just covered your basic if, and that was pretty much it. So let's cover stuff that's a little bit more than what we previously did. We've covered, for example, I just make a variable a equals 5 and b equals 10. And I just say if a is greater than b. I put a little colon, press enter, and then I can say, print, it could be anything, print yes, or something along the lines of that. I run it, and let's see what happens. Apparently nothing. So why does nothing happen? Well, because a is smaller, right? So if we shift this to less than, now it should print out yes. There we go. Now this kind of gives us a bit of an issue. We don't want it to just do nothing, right? If like our choice isn't true. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some extra little bit here. I'm going to have two choices. It's either smaller or bigger in this particular case. So I can use the word else. No. Well, no. There we go. So now it's going to do one of these things or the other. So I run. Oh, and I, of course, did not put a quote there. There we go. Yes, and if I change this back to the way it was originally, no. Now what if there are three choices in this case? It can be greater than, less than, or equal to, right? So the equal to is going to be a little bit different. Now, if I just go up here and say if it's equal to, that would be your notification that it's equal to. If I did this, well, then it's just going to say no whether it's greater than or less than. Only time it's going to hit this is when it is exactly equal to. So let me undo that back the way it was. So let me move this down a little bit. I'm going to add an extra statement here. This is basically else if. Another if, basically. So if a is, in this case, let's say less than b, then I will print no. And else, I'm going to print they are equal. Now what I want to do here is essentially, if it's greater than, print this. If it's less than, print this. And if it's anything else where there's only one other option, and that is they're equal, it'll print this. So if I run my code here, you'll see it is clearly telling me that no. If a is bigger, no. If a is less than, well, less than. Maybe let's make this a little more descriptive then. Less than, greater than. There we go. Might make it a little easier to read. There we go. It's less than, right? Now, if I change these numbers, 11, for example, well, now it's greater than. If I make them the same, now it's equal. So I have three choices here, and it's going to pick the one that matches in this case. Now, if I don't have this middle choice, it'll pick one or the other depending on what question I ask, basically. And I could ask these in pretty much any order. I could say if it's equal to, if it's less than, and then this would be if it's greater than, if I did it in that order. Generally speaking, I'd want to do it this way, though. It really doesn't matter. I mean, it'd be the same amount of code, but when I'm thinking this deals with everything bigger than that number, this deals with everything less than, and this deals with that one exception where they're the same. So thinking-wise, it makes more sense to me this way. Now, next up, we can do this elif, else if basically, as many times as we want actually. I could come down here and add an extra one here, for example. If A, let's just say, special case, if A is 0. It's 0, quotes, this way. So I can actually have several of these if I need. You can have pretty much as many as you want. But it's always going to start with an if. Let's just go up here and make this 0 just to see. Run. All right, well, it's less than. Now, this is where you run into your issue, order-wise. It's going to go down this list, 1, 2, 3, in that order, essentially. So if I put this here, well, the less than is already there, right? So it's going to hit that one, and then it's going to stop. But if I move this above it, in this order now, it's 0. It'll run this one and stop. So basically, each of these statements, it will pick one and run it, and then it'll ignore the rest. That's essentially what it does. And I can, of course, like I said, have as many of these as I need. But it's always going to start with if, and then typically you would end with else. I mean, I could get rid of that and run it like this, and it would still work. But generally speaking, you're going to want an if and then an else at the end, and then any other potential answers in the middle. And like I said, that could be a number of answers, not just a couple, but depends on what you're trying to do. Good examples of that would be, let's say, tic-tac-toe, for example. If I'm trying to see if a person won in tic-tac-toe, well, there's 9 slots. You need 3 X's or O's in each slot. There are generally going to be, I think it's like 8 possible win conditions. So I'd need 8 if, else if, else if, else if, essentially, if I were hard coding that and writing it down. Now, let's see what would happen here if we wrote it a little differently. Now, I'm writing it this way, and this way makes more sense to me because of previous programming experience, but this is generally how I feel more comfortable writing it. But you could technically say, if A greater than B, print yup, or something along the lines of that, and run. So I could potentially do it this way. Now, obviously, it's not greater than, so we shift it back to less than. But if I run it, you'll see it printed both of those. Now, this set right here is considered one set of statements, and this is considered a completely separate one. Once we get past the else, it's going to run whatever other statements we have. So I can do this on one line like this. Personally, I prefer this. I just feel it's easier to read. But as far as the program is concerned, it could care less which way you do it. And of course, I could do like I did up here, all on one line too. I could simply write my little thing, do it this way. Let's do another one, I guess. I'll make C equals 100, T equals 200 or something like that. Let's just make them both 100 for now. And let's write 3 conditions for this one. Let's say I go print, it helps if I do stuff, there we go, A, if A is greater than B, else print equals, if A equals B, else print. Now, as you can see, as I'm writing this, I would hate this, to be perfectly honest, because it is really hard to read. But, all right, they're both 100. So what should this print? We have A equals B, right? So if A is greater than B, it's not. Else if print equals, or I should say else print. If A equals B, it's going to print B. So let's just see what happens when I run this. It prints off B because, well, it is equal, right? Now, I don't have any of these little semicolons separating things, so the way it would probably interpret this is this else is here, and this, let's see, we got our little B here. I would probably interpret it like this, if, else if, kind of like that. I think it would consider it all kind of one statement. Again, I would prefer people don't write it this way. This is confusing even to me, and I'm looking at it and writing it. It's much easier to read if you do it this way. Well, that's clearly inside that if, that's clearly inside that if. Of course, writing one line of code does look nicer sometimes, but I'm just going to say, yeah, do it this way. This is probably the preferable way. I mean, if you just have one line, that's fine, but if you're trying to do it all on one like this, I think that's a little bit confusing. So that's your general rundown of ifs, else ifs, and the like. And of course, there's a whole myriad of other combinations we could do. Once we get to nested ifs and compound ifs, we can actually add a lot more depth and checking to this. But we'll get to that in another video.